My hands were steady when I walked into that chamber for the last time, but my heart was breaking inside my chest. I am Alina Voss, and for 40 years I had served as Earth's chief ambassador to the Galactic Concordat. 40 years of smiling at creatures who saw us as insects. 40 years of bowing my head while they called us a young species, a foolish species, a species that needed to be guided. Today, I would smile no more. The message had arrived 3 hours earlier. Just one line sent through a private channel only I could open. Deliver Protocol Janus, then come home. I did not know what Protocol Janus was. I had spent my whole career on Earth's diplomatic team, and even I had never heard those words before. But I knew what the order meant. After 40 years of patience, Earth had finally lost its patience. The walls of the Concordat spire rose around me like black glass mountains. 17 species sat in their high seats, looking down at the small human woman who stood alone in the center of the floor. The Vrelthi hegemon was there, his 3 eyes shining with cold amusement. The Tellurian trade master was polishing her silver claws. The Krell warrior caste had sent 6 representatives, each wearing armor made from the bones of conquered enemies. They were all waiting for me to beg. I did not beg. I opened my hand and a small projection floated into the air above my palm. It showed 3 planets, 3 human colony worlds, Verda, Heron's Reach, and the world we had named after my own grandmother, New Camden. 4.2 billion people had lived on those worlds. Mothers, fathers, children, grandparents, teachers and farmers and singers and fools. The Vrelthi fleet had turned all 3 worlds into ash 6 weeks ago. You are aware of these events, I said. My voice was clear and calm. I had practiced this speech in my mind for 6 weeks. During every long hour I spent staring at the ceiling of my apartment in the diplomatic quarter. You have reviewed the evidence. Your own investigation has confirmed that the Vrelthi hegemony attacked these civilian worlds without warning, without provocation, and without any declaration of war. The Vrelthi hegemon leaned forward in his seat. He was a tall creature with skin like wet leather and a mouth full of small, sharp teeth. Civilian targets, he said, and his voice came through the translation device as a wet hiss. Such soft words from such a soft species. Those worlds were resources. We took them. This is the way of all things in the great dark. And the Concordat agreed with this view, I continued, ignoring him completely. The official ruling, delivered to my office 2 days ago, declared that Earth had failed to protect its own holdings, and that humanity would now be moved from protected status to tributary status. We are to give up our independence. We are to send our young people as workers to your worlds. We are to bend our knee. The Tellurian trade master made a sound that was almost a laugh. Bend your knee, ambassador. Humans do not have knees worth bending. You have been a small joke in the corner of our great hall for 80 years. We tolerated you because you were amusing. Now you have become tiresome. I looked up at her. I let the silence stretch for a long moment. Somewhere in the upper galleries, an alien diplomat coughed. 80 years ago, I said slowly, when humanity first reached the stars, we made a choice. We could have come into your hall with weapons in our hands. Instead, we came with empty palms. We brought you our music. We brought you our medicines. We brought you the works of our greatest writers, our greatest dreamers, our greatest hearts. We asked only to be heard. We asked only to be allowed to grow. And we allowed it, the hegemon said. Be grateful. You did not allow it, I replied. My voice was still soft, but something hard had entered it now, something I had been holding back for 40 years. You watched us. You measured us. You wrote reports about whether we would be useful or whether we should be removed. We knew this. We always knew this. We chose peace anyway because we hoped, foolishly perhaps, that you might become what we had hoped you were. I closed my hand and the projection of the 3 dead worlds disappeared. I straightened my shoulders. My grandmother had been a teacher in New Camden. She had died there along with everyone else in her town. I had not allowed myself to cry yet. There would be time for crying later. I have come today to deliver Earth's final message to this body, I said. I have come to tell you that the era of our patience has ended. For 80 years, we showed you who we hoped to be. You looked at our hopeful face and you decided we had no other face. You were wrong. The chamber was very quiet now. Even the Krell warriors had stopped moving in their seats. We sought peace, I said. We sought it honestly with all our hearts. We laid down weapons we did not have to lay down. We made promises we did not have to make. We trusted you when you told us we were safe. Then your ships came to our colonies and our children burned, and you laughed and called us foolish for trusting you. I took a breath. Now you will meet the other side of humanity. The HFY hegemon laughed out loud. It was a horrible wet sound. The other side. Little ambassador, we have studied your kind. Your fleet has fewer than 200 ships. Your weapons are antique by our standards. Your home world cannot even defend its own moon. What other side could there possibly be? Show us this great hidden hand of humanity. We are waiting. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I smiled, very slightly, for the first time in 6 weeks. You will see it soon enough, I said. I am simply the messenger. I have delivered my message. Now I am going home. I turned to leave. The chamber erupted into noise behind me. Some of the alien diplomats were shouting. Some were laughing. The Tellurian trade master called after me, demanding that I explain myself, demanding that I return to my place. I did not turn around. I walked out of the Concordat spire with my back straight and my eyes forward, and I did not look at any of them again. My personal vessel was waiting at the diplomatic dock. Her name was the Mary Shelley, and she was not much of a ship by Concordat standards, but she would carry me home. I climbed aboard and gave the order to depart. As we lifted away from the Concordat home world, I sat at the small window and watched the great city shrink below me. I had lived there for most of my adult life. I would never see it again. My communications officer was a young man named Daniel Holt. He was perhaps 25 years old, and he had been assigned to my staff only 6 months ago. He came to the small observation room where I was sitting and stood quietly by the door. "Ambassador," he said, "we have just received confirmation from Earth Command. Your message was delivered exactly as required. They thank you for your service." "Thank you, Daniel." He hesitated. He was a kind young man, and I could see he was struggling with something. "Ambassador, may I ask you a question?" "You may." "What is Protocol Janus?" I looked at him for a long moment. Outside the window, the stars were beginning to stretch as we prepared to enter the jump. "I do not know, Daniel," I said honestly. "I was never told. I do not have the clearance. None of us in the diplomatic corps were ever told. We were kept ignorant on purpose so that even if we were captured, even if we were interrogated, we could not give away the secret." "But you delivered the message." "Yes, I delivered the message." "Then something is going to happen." I closed my eyes. I thought of my grandmother teaching her small students in New Camden. I thought of the HFY hegemon laughing in his high seat. I thought of 40 years of bowing my head, of swallowing my anger, of telling myself that peace was worth any price. "Yes, Daniel," I said, "something is going to happen. I do not know what it is. I do not know how big it is. But I have served Earth for 40 years, and I have learned to trust the people who built this world. If they say it is time, then it is time." He nodded slowly. He was very young. He had never seen war. None of us had, really. The colonial attacks had been the first true taste of it for our generation, and we had been told we were too weak to respond. We had been told a lie. The Mary Shelley made her jump. The stars stretched and twisted and disappeared, and we slipped into the great dark that lies between the worlds. I sat at the window for a long time, alone with my thoughts. I thought about all the dinners I had attended, all the speeches I had given, all the smiling faces of alien diplomats who had patted me on the head in their own strange ways and told me what a clever little human I was. I thought about how every single one of those moments had been data. Every word I exchanged had taught me something about them. Every gesture, every habit, every weakness, every fear. And I had sent every report back to Earth dutifully for 40 years. It occurred to me, sitting there in the silent ship, that I had not been only a diplomat. I had been a watcher. We had all been watchers. Every human who had ever sat at a Concordat table had been a pair of eyes for the people back home, the people who built things in secret, the people who had now, finally, decided that the time for hiding was over. For 80 years, the Concordat had looked at us and seen only what we wanted them to see. I did not know what was coming, but I knew that whatever it was, it had been built carefully, slowly, patiently, by people who had decided long ago that humanity would never again be at the mercy of creatures who saw us as small. I leaned back in my chair. The stars rushed past the window. I was going home, and I had a strange, terrible peace in my heart. Behind me, in the Concordat spire, the diplomats were probably still laughing. They would not laugh for much longer. The cold of the great dark had been my home for 43 years. My name is Marcus Cade, and I am the captain of a fleet that does not exist. I command ships whose names appear on no list. I lead crews who were declared legally dead by their own families, who attended their own funerals, who said goodbye to everyone they loved before they came aboard. We are the ones who have been waiting in the silence between the stars. I was 41 years old when I volunteered for Project Janus. I am 84 now. My wife, Margaret, died waiting for me to come home. My son, who was 10 years old when I left, is now an old man with grandchildren of his own. He believes I am buried in a small cemetery outside Boston. I have a stone there with my name on it. I have never seen it. The order arrived at 3:47 in the morning ship time. I was not asleep. I almost never sleep anymore. I was sitting at the small desk in my quarters, reading an old book of poems that Margaret had given me before I left when the alarm chimed. My executive officer, Commander Helen Brooks, was knocking on my door before I could stand up. "Sir," she said, and her voice was different than I had ever heard it. "Sir, the Janus signal has come through." I opened the door. Helen was a tall woman with gray hair cut short and eyes the color of cold steel. She had served beside me for 22 years. We had been friends and colleagues and sometimes more, in the strange way that two people become close when they share a small ship in the great dark for decades. She was crying. I had never seen her cry. "Are you certain?" I asked. "Triple confirmed, sir. The codes match. The seals match. The ambassador delivered the message 6 hours ago." I closed my eyes for a long moment. I felt the weight of 43 years lift from my shoulders, and in its place something heavier settled. The waiting was over. Now came the work we had spent half a lifetime preparing for. "Helen," I said, "go to the bridge. Begin Phase 1 preparations. I will be there in 5 minutes." "Yes, sir." She turned to leave. I stopped her at the door. "Helen." "Sir." "I am sorry." She looked at me. She understood. We were about to do things that could not be undone, things that no human had done in living memory, things that would shape the next 10,000 years of galactic history. The weight of it had finally arrived after all these years of preparation, and there was no escaping it now. "So am I, sir," she said quietly. Then she left. I dressed in my uniform, the real one, the one I had worn only twice in 43 years and would wear now for the rest of my life. I walked through the corridors of my ship, the carrier vessel known only as Hidden Star One, and I felt the eyes of my crew on me as I passed. Word had spread already. They knew. Some of them saluted as I went by. Some of them stood very still, their faces pale. Some of them were praying. I reached the bridge. The view screens showed the great dark all around us, the empty space between the spiral arms of the galaxy, the place no Concordat sensor had ever reached. Spread out across millions of kilometers, hidden in the void, 4,000 human warships were beginning to wake up. 4,000. Built one at a time, in perfect secrecy, over the course of 80 years. hidden in deep space yards constructed inside hollowed-out asteroids that had been pushed out of the solar system on slow trajectories decades before any of us were born, crewed by volunteers, by their children, and by their children's children. An entire generation had been born in the great dark, knowing nothing else, trained from childhood for one purpose and one purpose only. The first generation born aboard had been called the children of Janus. The youngest of them was now 52 years old. She was sitting at the helm of my ship, a woman named Sarah Whitmore with her father's gray eyes and her mother's quick hands. She had never seen a sky. She had never walked on grass. She had never felt rain. None of the children had. They knew Earth only from recordings, from stories, from the photographs their parents and grandparents kept in small frames beside their beds. And yet they were the most loyal soldiers humanity had ever produced, because Earth was not a place to them. Earth was an idea. Earth was the home they had been told they were defending, the home they would protect even though they would never live there. There is no loyalty in this galaxy more pure than the loyalty of someone who fights for a place they have only seen in dreams. "Captain on the bridge," Helen announced. The crew stood at attention. "As you were," I said. I walked to my chair. I sat down. I looked at the view screen. "Status." "All ships acknowledging, sir," said my communications officer, a young man named Peter Hollies. "Phase 1 coordinates locked. Translation jump will be ready in 6 minutes. Targeting locked, sir. The Vrelthi genetic archive on Threlmer Prime." I nodded slowly. The choice of target had been made decades ago, before I was even part of the project. The doctrine was clear. We would not strike military targets first. We would not strike fleets or shipyards or weapons depots. We would strike the things that mattered to them, the things they loved, the things that made them who they were. The Vrelthi genetic archive was the heart of their species. It was a great vault on their second moon, where every Vrelthi reproductive line was stored and managed. Their entire future, every child they would ever have, every generation that would ever come, depended on that archive. It was their most sacred place. They had built it in the open, on the surface of a moon, because they believed nothing in the galaxy would ever dare to threaten it. We were going to remove it from existence. "Open a fleet channel," I said. "Channel open, sir." I took a breath. I thought about Margaret. I thought about my son, who had buried a stranger he believed was his father. I thought about the 4.2 billion souls on Verda and Heron's Reach in New Camden. I thought about every quiet meeting in every small office on Earth where men and women had built this fleet, and this plan and this terrible day, knowing they would not live to see it finished. "This is Captain Marcus Cade," I said, my voice carried to every ship in the fleet. "Today we end 43 years of silence. Today we answer for the 4 billion souls who were taken from us. Today we tell the galaxy what humanity truly is. Some of you were born in this fleet. Some of you joined as I did long ago, leaving everything behind. All of you have served with honor in a service that no one will ever know existed. Whatever happens after today, remember this. We did not choose this path. They chose it for us. We only chose to walk it well, translate to attack positions on my mark." I paused. The bridge was very quiet. "Mark." The hidden fleet jumped. Threlmer Prime was a yellow star with 7 planets and a dozen moons. The Vrelthi had colonized it more than 10,000 years ago. It was their oldest world. The genetic archive sat on the surface of the second moon, surrounded by gardens that the Vrelthi tended with tremendous care, places where their hatchlings came of age and learned the histories of their families. We arrived in the outer system at 1400 hours local time. We did not approach the planet. We did not engage the orbital defenses. We did not give any warning at all. From a distance of 3 light minutes, we launched the first strike. The weapon was called a relativistic projectile. It was a simple thing in concept. A piece of metal, shaped into a long needle, accelerated to nearly the speed of light. There were no explosives in it. There was no warhead. The kinetic energy alone, when it struck, would release more force than any bomb humanity had ever built. It would arrive ahead of any sensor warning, faster than any defense system could react. It would simply appear, and then nothing would be the same. The strike took 40 seconds to reach its target. We watched on the long-range sensors. The needle struck the second moon at a point precisely above the genetic archive. The sensors went white for a moment. When the readings returned, the moon had a new crater, 10 kilometers wide, and the archive, the gardens, the surrounding cities, the entire region, simply did not exist anymore. I felt nothing. I felt everything. I cannot describe it. "Confirm the strike," I said quietly. "Strike confirmed, sir," Peter said. His voice was shaking. "Target eliminated. No survivors at the strike site. Withdraw the fleet." "Sir." "You heard me, Lieutenant. Withdraw the fleet. Translate back to dark space. We are not going to engage their defenses. We are not going to be seen. We are going to disappear, and they are going to be left wondering what just happened to them." The fleet jumped again. We slipped back into the great dark, and within minutes there was no trace of us anywhere in the Threlmer system. The Vrelthi defense fleet would scramble. Their sensors would search. They would find nothing. They would not know who had struck them. They would not know how. They would only know that their most sacred place was gone, and that they had no idea how to find the people who had done it. This was the doctrine. This was the heart of Janus. We would not fight them in the open. We would not give them a target. We would appear and disappear like ghosts, striking the things they loved most, and we would continue to do so until they understood the truth that humanity had finally decided to teach them. You cannot fight what you cannot see. I sat in my chair on the bridge of Hidden Star 1. The crew was silent around me. We had done it. The first strike. 43 years of waiting, and it was done in less than a minute. There was no celebration. There were no cheers. We all understood on some level that something terrible had just been born into the galaxy, and we had been the ones to give birth to it. Helen came to stand beside my chair. She put her hand on my shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. "Phase 2 preparations, Captain," she asked softly. "Yes, Helen, begin Phase 2. We have many more targets and the night is long." She nodded and turned away to give the orders. I looked at the view screen, at the great dark spreading endlessly in every direction. Somewhere out there, the Concordat was just beginning to learn what had happened on Threlmer Prime. Somewhere out there, alien admirals were being woken from their sleep. Somewhere out there, alien diplomats were trying to make sense of news that did not seem possible. For 80 years they had laughed at us. They had called us a young species, a soft species, a species that did not understand the Great Dark. We understood the Great Dark very well, as it turned out. We had been living in it for 43 years, building this moment, one quiet day at a time. I closed my eyes. I thought of Margaret and of my son and of all the things I had given up. I thought of the 4 billion souls we were about to answer for. I thought of all the work that still lay ahead of us, all the long nights, all the strikes that still had to come. "Set course for the next target," I said. The fleet moved on. In the great dark, the hunt had begun, and there was no creature in the galaxy who could see us coming. My name is Idris Akefer, and I am 91 years old. I designed all of this, every piece of it. Every line of code, every targeting algorithm, every strategic choice. I am the architect of Project Janus, and I have spent my entire adult life preparing for the day that has now finally arrived. I am sitting in my office on the dark side of the moon, in a facility whose existence has been hidden from every government on Earth except for the Black Council. The walls of my office are lined with photographs. My wife, Cordelia, who left me 20 years ago when she finally understood what I was building. My daughter, Beatrice, who returned to me 10 years ago when she finally understood why. My students, who became the engineers of this terrible day, and who are now scattered across the solar system, watching their work unfold. On the screen in front of me, the news from Threlmer Prime is just beginning to spread. The Concordat networks are exploding with confused chatter. The Vrelthi are screaming for answers. The other species are demanding investigations. Nobody knows what happened. Nobody knows who did it. They are all looking outward, searching the obvious places, and they will find nothing. I take a sip of tea. My hands shake a little. They have shaken for years now. Old age is not kind to anyone, not even to those who reshape galaxies. I want to explain something because I think it is important. I want to explain what humanity actually is, because I believe we have been misunderstood, both by the Concordat and, in some ways, by ourselves. We are not a peaceful species. We never were. Anyone who has read our history honestly knows this. We have spent 10,000 years fighting one another in every corner of our small blue world with every weapon we could invent. We have starved each other, burned each other's cities, broken each other's bodies and minds. We have done unspeakable things to one another, more times than any honest historian can count. But somewhere along the way, perhaps a few hundred years ago, something changed in us. We began to understand in our deepest places what we were capable of. We had built weapons that could end us all. We had stood at the edge of our own destruction more than once. And we made a choice, slowly, painfully, with many failures along the way. We chose to be better than we had been. Peace for humanity was never a natural state. It was a discipline. It was a thing we had to practice every day because we knew in our marrow what waited if we ever stopped practicing. We chose peace because we had seen the alternative, and the alternative had nearly ended us. When we reached the stars, we brought this discipline with us. We met the Concordat, and we chose, again, to extend our peaceful hand. We did this not because we were weak. We did this because we had learned, through long and bitter experience, that violence is a door that is very easy to open and very difficult to close. The Concordat saw our extended hand, and they thought it was empty. They thought we held nothing in reserve. They thought our peace was the peace of a sleeping animal, a creature that did not know how to wake up. They were wrong. They were so deeply, terribly wrong. We had been awake the whole time. We were simply trying not to be the thing we knew we could become. The Black Council was formed in the year that Earth signed the Concordat treaties. There were 7 members at the start. Generals, scientists, philosophers, statesmen. They had read the treaties and they had understood immediately what kind of creatures the Concordat truly were. They had seen the contempt in the alien eyes. They had read between the lines of every smiling document. They had known, with a certainty that was almost a religious feeling, that this peace would not hold forever. So they began to build, quietly, patiently. They built the fleet in the dark spaces beyond the system. They built the moon facilities under the false story of mining operations. They built the weapons that no Concordat inspector would ever find because the inspectors were never told where to look. They also built me, or rather they recruited me. I was 23 years old, a young engineer working on theoretical weapon systems for the European Defense Authority. They came to me one evening in a small cafe in Geneva. 3 of them, 2 men and a woman, very polite, very clear. They told me that my country, my world, my species needed me. They told me that I would have to give up many things. I would never marry happily. I would never have a normal career. I would never speak of my work to anyone. I would die, eventually, in a small office on the dark side of the moon, having reshaped the galaxy without anyone ever knowing my name. I said yes. I did not even hesitate. I have never regretted it, not even now. Cordelia did not know at first. I told her I was a researcher in propulsion systems, which was technically true. We were happy together for many years. We had a daughter, Beatrice, who was clever and kind and full of light. I loved them both with all the love I had. But the work consumed me. I was gone for months at a time, on the moon, on Mars. In the deep stations beyond Pluto, I missed birthdays. I missed school plays. I missed the slow, ordinary moments that make a marriage real. By the time Beatrice was 12, Cordelia had begun to suspect that something was very wrong. By the time Beatrice was 15, Cordelia had pieced together enough fragments to understand what kind of work I was doing. She did not leave me right away. She tried for years to make me stop. She begged me. She cried. She told me that I was building something monstrous, that no peace could come from such weapons, that I was becoming a man she could no longer recognize. I tried to explain. I tried to make her understand the long view, the careful logic, the terrible necessity. She would not be convinced. In the end, she left, and she took Beatrice with her, and she made me promise that I would never contact our daughter again as long as I lived. I kept that promise for 10 years. Then Beatrice came to find me on the moon. She was 34 years old. She had become a scientist herself, a brilliant one. She had spent years secretly studying the Concordat, reading every leaked document she could find, talking to every contact she could develop. She had reached, on her own, the same conclusions her father had reached 40 years earlier. She walked into my office and she said, "Father, I understand now. I am sorry I did not understand before. Let me help." I cried. I had not cried in many years. We embraced, my daughter and I, in a small office on the dark side of the moon, and the next day she joined the Black Council. She is here now, standing at the door of my office. She is looking at me with concern. I am old and I have not slept in 3 days, and the news from Threlmer Prime is still spreading. "Father," she says gently, "you should rest." There is no time to rest, Beatrice. Phase 2 is beginning. Phase 2 will continue without you for a few hours. You have done your part. Let the others carry the weight now. I shake my head. I cannot rest. Not yet. The Vrelthi counterstrike is coming, and I want to be awake when it does. They have launched 12,000 capital ships toward the Sol system. They believe Earth is undefended. They believe they will arrive in our home system and find us cowering, that they will end our species in a single hour of fire. They are about to be educated. "Beatrice," I say, "what is the status of the Kuiper defense?" "All systems active, Father. The platforms are awake. The minds are linked. The lattice is ready." I nod. I am proud of this, perhaps the most. The Kuiper defense was my final great work, the thing I built in my last years, when I knew I would not live to see most of what was coming. It is a system unlike anything humanity has ever made. It is a network of weapon platforms, scattered throughout the icy belt at the edge of our solar system, linked by quantum communication into a single coordinated mind. When an enemy fleet enters Sol space, the lattice will see it. The lattice will calculate every ship, every trajectory, every weapon. And the lattice will respond all at once with the precision of a single thought. The Vrelthi will arrive at the edge of our system. They will enter the Kuiper belt, and they will not leave it. I do not take pleasure in this. I want that to be understood. I have lived a long life, and I have built terrible things, and I have done so with full awareness of what they are. I am not a monster who delights in the destruction of others. I am simply a man who long ago understood what kind of universe we live in, and who chose to make sure that humanity would survive in it. We did not start this. The Vrelthi started it when their fleet glassed our colony worlds. The Concordat started it when they laughed at our grief. We tried for 80 years to teach them that there was a better way to be. They refused to learn. So now, finally, they will learn the lesson they chose for themselves. I think about the children of New Camden. I think about my own daughter, sitting beside me, alive and well. I think about the choices we make as a species, the long, slow choices that decide what kind of creatures we become. I think about how thin the line is between the people who build hospitals and the people who build weapons, and how often in our long history those people have been the same. The reports begin to come in from the Kuiper belt. The Vrelthi fleet has arrived. The lattice has engaged. I do not need to watch the details. I know what is happening. The lattice is making its calculations. The platforms are firing in coordinated sequences. Every Vrelthi ship is being addressed individually with weapons designed specifically for it, in patterns the Vrelthi cannot even comprehend, much less defend against. It takes 19 minutes. When it is over, 12,000 ships have become drifting fragments at the edge of our system. Not one of them reaches the inner planets. Not one of them fires a single shot at Earth. I close my eyes. I am very tired. Father, Beatrice says softly. She takes my hand. Her hand is warm. Mine is cold. Beatrice, I say, I am going to rest now. Yes, Father, rest. I lean back in my chair. Outside the window of my office, the stars are very bright. The moon is very quiet. Earth turns slowly in the distance, blue and white and impossibly beautiful. I think about Cordelia. I hope she has lived a peaceful life. I hope she will hear someday what we accomplished and that some small part of her will be able to forgive what I became. I do not need her forgiveness, not really, but I would like to have it if it is possible. I am 91 years old. I have built a thing that will reshape the galaxy. I have done it not with hatred but with love. Love for my species, love for my daughter, love for the small blue world that gave me life and that would not survive without the work I have done. We did not become monsters today. We simply stopped pretending we were not capable of becoming them. There is a difference, and it matters, and I hope someone someday will understand the difference well enough to write it down properly. I close my eyes and I rest. My name is Vorthal Sen, and I am the speaker of the Concordat, and for 600 of your years I believed I understood the shape of power in this galaxy. I have served on the High Council since I was a youngling. I have seen 4 species reduced. I have watched 3 rebellions broken. I have signed treaties and ordered investigations and shaped the long, slow movements of 200 civilizations. I did not understand humans. I am sitting in my private chamber in the upper levels of the Concordat spire. The chamber is empty except for me. My aides have all fled or hidden or gone to be with their families. The reports continue to arrive, hour after hour, and each one is worse than the last. The Vrelthi hegemony, in the 72 hours since the strike on Threlmer Prime, has effectively ceased to exist as a unified political body. Their genetic archive was destroyed. Their fleet of 12,000 was annihilated at the edge of the human system without inflicting a single casualty on the humans. Their other military fleets, scattered across their territory, have been attacked one by one in coordinated strikes, by ships that appear from nowhere, fire with terrible precision, and disappear before any defense can respond. The Tellurian Mercantile Federation has collapsed. Their entire financial network, the great web of credit and trade that held their society together, was infected with sleeping code that the humans had inserted somehow over the course of decades. When the code activated, every transaction stopped. Every account froze. Every supply chain halted. Within 48 hours, food riots broke out on 3 Tellurian core worlds. Their government has resigned. There is no longer anyone in charge of the Tellurian Federation. The Krell Pact, the warrior species who sent 6 representatives to laugh at the human ambassador in this very chamber, lost their entire warrior caste in one night. The leadership of every Krell military house on 20 separate worlds was assassinated simultaneously by means we cannot identify. We have found no human agents. We have found no weapons. We have found no evidence of how they were reached. We have only the bodies and the silence that has fallen across the Krell worlds. I review the records. I review them again. I look back across 80 years of contact with humanity, and I see, finally, what was happening the whole time. Ambassador Voss, Trade Minister Holloway, Cultural Attaché Brooks, every human who ever sat at our tables, who ever attended our ceremonies, who ever shared a meal with us. They were all, every single one of them, observers. They learned our languages so completely that they spoke them better than we did. They learned our customs so deeply that they could quote our oldest poets from memory. They asked questions that seemed innocent and absorbed answers that seemed harmless. They were mapping us, the whole time. Every smile, every conversation, every shared joke at every diplomatic function for 80 years was a single piece of an enormous picture. and they were assembling that picture in some quiet room on their small blue world, and now they have finished the picture, and they are using it to take us apart. I think about the human ambassador. I think about Alina Voss, who stood in this chamber 3 days ago and told us, calmly and clearly, that we were about to meet the other side of humanity. I laughed at her. I admit it. I laughed at her with the rest of them. I thought she was a small woman making empty threats. I thought her words were the desperate posturing of a defeated species. I was wrong. We were all wrong. She knew. She must have known. Not the details, perhaps, but she knew the shape of what was coming. She walked into our chamber with that knowledge in her heart, and she delivered her message with perfect grace, and she walked out, and she went home, and now we are all sitting in the rubble of everything we built, and she is somewhere on earth, watching it happen. There is a knock at the door of my chamber. I almost do not answer. I am very tired. I have not slept in many cycles. But the knock comes again, and then a third time, and finally I rise and open the door. A Tellurian aide is standing there. She is one of the few who has not fled. Her name is Kelly's, and she has served in the diplomatic corps for almost as long as I have. Her face is gray with worry. "Speaker," she says, "there has been a transmission. The humans are speaking to us at last." My heart, which has not felt much of anything for 3 days, suddenly feels very heavy. From Earth? No, Speaker. The signal does not come from Earth. We cannot locate its source. It comes from somewhere in deep space, but every time we try to pinpoint it, the signal seems to come from a different location. Of course it does, I murmur. Of course. Do you wish to receive the transmission, Speaker? Yes, bring it to my chamber. I will receive it alone. She bows and leaves. A few minutes later, the great view screen in my chamber comes to life. A face appears. A human face. Alina Voss, the ambassador who stood here 3 days ago, the small woman I dismissed. She is older than I remembered, or perhaps the last few days have aged her. Her hair is gray and pulled back simply. Her eyes are tired but clear. She is sitting in a small office somewhere with a window behind her that looks out on a green and blue world. Earth. She is on Earth. "Speaker Vorthel," she says quietly. The translation device renders her voice perfectly. "I hope this transmission finds you well. I am speaking to you on behalf of the people of Earth. I have been authorized to deliver our terms." I sit down slowly in my high chair. I prepare myself for what is coming. I expect demands. I expect humiliation. I expect a list of impossible requirements designed to break what remains of the Concordat. What she says next is not what I expect at all. "The people of Earth wish to make several things clear," she begins. "First, we have not destroyed the Vrelthi species. The Vrelthi worlds, with the exception of certain specific targets, remain intact. The Vrelthi people are still alive. We have removed their ability to wage war on a galactic scale. We have not removed their right to exist." I listen carefully. This is not the language of a conqueror. This is the language of someone who has thought very carefully about what she is saying. "Second, we have not destroyed the Tellurian financial network. We have only suspended it. The codes to restore it are in our possession. They will be released as part of the agreement we are about to propose." I lean forward. "Third, the Krell warrior caste has been removed, but the Krell civilian population has not been touched. Their farmers, their teachers, their children, their poets, all remain. Krell society can rebuild itself in time, around the values it claims to have always held but rarely practiced." She pauses. She looks directly at the camera, directly at me. "Speaker, we want you to understand something. We did not do these things because we hate you. We did not do them because we wanted to rule over you. We did them because you left us no other choice. For 80 years we asked to be respected as equals. You refused. We asked to be allowed to live in peace. You refused. We watched you destroy 4 billion of our people, and we watched you laugh about it. So we showed you what we are capable of. We showed you only a small portion. We could have shown you more. We chose not to." She takes a breath. Here are our terms. The Concordat as a governing body will be dissolved. In its place, a new council will be formed. It will have fewer members. It will include humanity as a permanent voting member. It will be governed by laws that apply equally to all species, including ours. There will be prohibitions on certain weapons and certain behaviors, and these prohibitions will apply to humanity as fully as they apply to anyone else. We are not asking for an empire. We are asking for a fair seat at a fair table. I stare at her. I cannot speak. The terms she is offering are, by the standards of any conqueror in our recorded history, almost unbelievably generous. We have lost a war, and the victor is not asking for our worlds or our resources or our subjugation. The victor is asking for a chair at a council, and for the dissolution of a body that, in honesty, has not served any species well in centuries. You have 7 days to consider these terms, Speaker, she continues. After that, if you have not responded, we will assume that the Concordat wishes to continue the current state of conflict. We do not want this. We have demonstrated in the past 3 days what we are capable of doing. We do not wish to demonstrate it further, but we will if we must. She softens very slightly. Speaker Vorthel, I sat across from you many times over the years. We shared meals together. You were never one of the worst. I remember you as a creature of some thoughtfulness, even when you were unable to act on it. I am asking you now, personally, to take these terms back to your council and to argue for them. Save what you can save. Build something better together with us while there is still time. The transmission ends. The screen goes dark. I sit alone in my chamber for a very long time. I do not move. I do not make any sound. The weight of 600 years of service settles on my shoulders, and beneath that weight I find, to my own surprise, something I have not felt in a long time. Hope. It is a small thing. It is a fragile thing, but it is real. The humans could have destroyed us. They have shown us that they can, and they are choosing not to. They are offering us a path forward. They are offering us the chance to build something new with them instead of being ruled by them. I think about my own homeworld. I think about my children who are grown now and my grandchildren who are just beginning their lives. I think about what kind of galaxy I want them to inherit. The old Concordat is dead. There is no saving it. The question is what comes next. I rise from my chair. I straighten my robes. I walk out of my chamber and down the long corridor to the great hall where the council is meeting in emergency session. The other delegates are arguing when I enter. They are shouting. They are demanding action. They are calling for unity, for resistance, for a great alliance of the remaining species to challenge the human menace. They have not yet heard the human terms. I take my place at the high seat. The room slowly falls silent. Listen to me, I say quietly. Listen to me carefully, because I am only going to say this once. The Concordat is finished. We are not going to challenge the humans. We are going to accept their terms. We are going to dissolve our old structures and build something new alongside them. We are going to do this because they have offered us mercy, and mercy is a thing that should never be refused when it is offered, especially by those who have no obligation to offer it. The shouting begins again. I let it wash over me. I will spend the next many days arguing for this path. Some delegates will hate me for it. Some species will refuse the terms and continue to resist, and they will be reduced further until they too accept or until nothing remains of them. But I will sign the accords. My homeworld will perhaps never forgive me, but I do not need their forgiveness. I have seen what waits on the other path. I will not let my grandchildren inherit it. In a small office on a small green and blue world, Elena Voss is watching the negotiations begin. I think perhaps she is smiling, just a little, after all this long, terrible time. My name is Elena Voss, and I am 68 years old, and I am standing in the chamber where it all began. The Concordat Spire is not called the Concordat Spire anymore. It is called the Concord Hall. The black glass walls are the same, but the seats have been rearranged. There are fewer of them. Some species are no longer represented, not because we destroyed them, but because they collapsed under the weight of what they learned about themselves in the long aftermath of the war. The Vrelthi, once the proudest and most fearsome of all concordat species, are now a small, struggling people who have only recently begun to send representatives to interplanetary gatherings again. They sit quietly when they come. They listen more than they speak. It is a great change. I am no longer an ambassador. 5 years ago, after the terms were signed and the new council was formed, I was elected to be the first speaker of the conquered. It was not a position I sought. I had hoped to retire, to spend my last years in a small house on the coast of Maine, reading books and watching the sea. But the new council needed someone who could bridge the worlds, someone trusted by humans and respected by aliens, and there were not many of us who fit that description. So I serve. I will serve until I am too old to do so, and then I will go home, finally, and I will sit on my porch and watch the waves. The chamber is quiet today. We are between sessions. I have come here alone, which I am not supposed to do at my age, but the security officers have learned that I will sometimes slip away from them when I want to think. I am standing in the center of the floor, on the same spot where, 25 years ago, I delivered Earth's final message. I remember every moment of that day. I remember the laughter of the Vrelthi hegemon. I remember the cold amusement of the Tellurian trade master. I remember the way my hands did not shake, even though my heart was breaking. I remember walking out of this chamber back straight, eyes forward, into a future I could not see. The future has come. It is not what any of us imagined. It is not perfect. It is not always good, but it is real and it belongs to us and we built it ourselves. I closed my eyes for a moment. There were costs, terrible costs. 4.2 billion humans died on the colony worlds before Project Janus activated. 800 million more died in the brief period of the war itself, in colonies and outposts and small forgotten places. Across all the species of the old Concordat, the death toll exceeded 30 billion souls. It is a number too large to truly understand. I do not try to understand it as a number. I understand it as faces, as names, as small specific lives. My grandmother in New Camden, who taught small children to read. The Vrelthi gardener who tended the trees outside the genetic archive on Threlmer Prime, who I never met and whose name I will never know. The Tellurian banker who could not feed her children when the financial network froze. The Krell child who woke up to find his father gone. I keep a list. It is in my office. Every night before I sleep, I read 10 names from the list. I started with the human names because there are records and I could find them. I read 10 names every night. At my current pace, I will finish reading the human names just before I die. I will not live long enough to read the names of the others. I have made peace with this. I do what I can. It is enough, or it is not enough, but it is what I can do. A young woman approaches me across the chamber floor. She is human, perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair and serious eyes. Her name is Margaret Holloway, and she is being trained to be my eventual successor. She has good instincts. She is patient in a way I never quite was. She will be a better speaker than I was in time. "Speaker," she says quietly, "I thought I might find you here." "I am sorry, Margaret. I needed a moment alone." "It is all right. May I ask you something?" "You may." She is silent for a moment. She is choosing her words carefully. I have taught her to do this, and she has learned the lesson well. "Do you regret what we did?" she asks finally. "The strikes, the war, the way it ended. If you could go back, would you do it differently?" I look at her. She is so young. She was a child when the war happened. She does not remember the laughter in this chamber. She does not remember the quiet weight of 40 years of being treated as a small, foolish creature by beings who thought they were superior. She knows the history, but she does not know the feeling of it. "Margaret," I say slowly, "let me tell you the truth. I regret that it was necessary. I do not regret that we did it. There is a difference, and you will spend your career learning what that difference is." She nods. She is taking the words in, storing them away. She will think about them for years, perhaps for the rest of her life. The Concordat would not have stopped on its own, I continue. They had glassed our worlds, and they would have done it again, and they would have done it again after that, until we either submitted or were destroyed. The choice we faced was not between violence and peace. The choice was between the violence we knew was coming and the violence we had quietly prepared to use in response to it. We chose the second. We did so carefully, with as much restraint as we could manage. We did not commit genocide, even though we could have. We did not enslave, even though we could have. We took what we needed to take in order to be safe, and then we offered the others a fair path forward, and most of them took it. That is the truth of what we did. It is not a clean truth, but it is an honest one. She nods again slowly. And the people who built it, she asks, the captain of the hidden fleet, the architect of Janus, do you think they sleep well? I smile very slightly. It is a sad smile. Captain Marcus Cade returned to Earth 6 months after the Accords were signed. He went to his son's home in a small town outside Boston, and he knocked on the door, and his son opened it and saw a stranger. Marcus said, "I am your father, and I am very sorry I was gone for so long." They sat together in the kitchen for many hours that night. The son was angry and grieving and confused, but by the end of the night he had begun to listen. They are still working on rebuilding what was lost. It will take the rest of Marcus's life, but he sleeps now in a small room in his son's house, and from what I am told, he sleeps better than he has in many years. And Dr. HFY, he died last winter peacefully in his sleep. His daughter Beatrice was with him. He was 96. He had spent the last years of his life writing letters to his ex-wife, who forgave him before she herself passed away, to his old students scattered across the system, to me on occasion. They were good letters. He had become, in his old age, a man who understood himself. That is not a small thing. Many of us never get there. Margaret is quiet. She is absorbing all of this. What did humanity learn? She asks finally. From all of it, what do you think we learned? I think about the question for a long time. I think about the long years of Earth's history, the centuries of fighting one another, the slow, painful discovery that violence is a door easier to open than to close. I think about the 80 years of trying to be the better version of ourselves, in front of beings who saw our better self as a weakness. I think about the moment when we finally stopped pretending, and what we did then, and what came after. I think about the children of New Camden. I think about my grandmother. I think about the Vrelthi gardener I will never meet. I think we learned, I say slowly, that peace is not a gift you give to others. Peace is a structure you build brick by brick, and sometimes the bricks are made of terrible things. We tried for 80 years to build peace out of nothing but goodwill. It did not work. Goodwill is not enough. Peace requires a foundation. The foundation is the understanding on all sides of what each of us is capable of, and the agreement that we will not do those things to one another. We had that understanding among ourselves on Earth, hard-earned over many centuries. We did not have it with the Concordat, so we had to build it. We had to teach them what we could do before we could trust each other not to do it. She is listening intently. And now, I continue, now there is a kind of honesty in our dealings with the other species that did not exist before. We do not pretend to be smaller than we are. They do not pretend to despise us. We have all seen one another's true face, and we have decided together to build something better than what came before. It is not a perfect peace. It is a working peace. That is the most any species can ever really have. A bell chimes somewhere in the upper levels of the conquered hall. The next session is about to begin. Margaret straightens her shoulders. I straighten mine. Come, I say, we have work to do. We walk together across the chamber floor, toward the high doors that lead to the council chambers. I think, as I walk, about the young woman I was when I first stood here, 45 years ago, naive and hopeful, and ready to be ground down by the great wheel of the Concordat. I think about the older woman I became, the one who walked out of this chamber 25 years ago with a message of fire on her lips. I think about the woman I am now, who has lived long enough to see the seeds of that fire grow into something almost like a garden. A young Krell aide brings me a cup of tea as we enter the council chamber. She is perhaps 18 years old. She was born after the war. She has never known a galaxy where humans were anything other than equals. She smiles at me in the way Krell smile, which is to slightly tilt their heads. I smile back. I take my high seat. I look out across the council. Humans, Krell, Tellurians, Vrelthi, and a dozen other species sitting together, arguing, listening, building. It is a slow process. It is often frustrating, but it is real. We sought peace in the beginning, and we did not find it. We had to walk through fire to get to it. We carried the weight of those who fell along the way, and we will carry that weight forever, because some weights should never be set down. But we made it in the end. We made it to a place where the children of the Krell and the children of humanity sit in the same rooms and learn the same lessons and look at one another with curiosity instead of contempt. I think that is enough, or I think it is the beginning of something that will someday be enough. My name is Elena Voss. I was Earth's last diplomat of the old order and her first true ambassador of the new. I delivered the final message of the world that was. I have spent my long years trying to build, alongside many others, the world that is. There is more work to do. There will always be more work to do. I take a sip of my tea. I look at Margaret, sitting beside me, ready to take notes, ready to learn, ready to one day take my place. I begin the session. The work continues. The end.